Welcome to another edition of Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton. And I know everyone's used to me talking about football. But no, on this episode, we're not going to be talking about a lot of football. We will probably talk about football players and athletes in general, but we're not going to talk about football in this episode. For those that aren't aware, the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It is very, very important that you have your mental health intact because, those things are very, very important in terms of your mental, in terms of living day to day. And if you don't take care of your mental, it's just like your physical health. You won't make it too long. You got to take care of those things. That is a part of life, part of living. And for far too long, a lot of people have ignored those different things and tried to say, oh, we can do this. I can do this. I'm fine. I'm fine. But we have to address those things. And on this episode, we are going to address some of those things. And I brought someone along on this episode that is an expert in the field.
All
Miss
right now.
Cathyanna Nelson. How you doing?
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me today. And yes, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I am super excited to be here to talk about mental health today. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. But I want to, before we get into mental health and kind of breaking down everything, I want to kind of get a little bit into your journey, kind of find out how you got to where you are now. Now, mental health is not necessarily a field everyone jumps into. So, how did you kind of first get the inkling that you wanted to kind of go in this direction?
Well, for me, I've always wanted to be in some type of helping profession. And so I would see in my community, I come from a very small town in rural Georgia. And I would just see things. There would be people in my community who struggled with substance abuse, or you would kind of see that maybe something mentally, was not right with certain people. And I just wanted to learn a little bit more about that. And I was just more interested in that. And so initially, when I went into undergrad, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. But when I took my psychology course, that really intrigued me. So I ended up changing my major to psychology, and I could just kind of hit the ground rolling from there. I just saw that there was definitely a need. And like you said before, there are many people who don't value mental health, but it is so critical and crucial in the way we live, the choices that we make, all of those things. So it's crucial for how we live on a daily basis. And so I, wanted to be a part of helping people and cultivating a environment where people felt safe to be vulnerable and to talk about their mental health issues and just kind of help the community as a whole. So that's how I ended up in as a social worker in mental health.
Yeah, definitely. The observation part. I've heard that a few times from different people in different fields they've gotten into. The observation, the looking around, the kind of understanding where they are and what they can do to help. It's kind of led them to the careers that they've had.
Mhm.
Now, where's your career kind of led you in certain places, if you don't mind going into those different aspects?
Oh my gosh. So we would be here all day. Like I said, I'm a social worker. And so I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So in grad school, you are trained to literally be able to provide assistance and advocate and educate and, assist people in any situation, right? So the area of social work is really broad. I started out working with children and families for the Department of Children and Family Services. I then transitioned into working with individuals who were incarcerated and really help them gain the tools that they need in order to kind of reacclimate into the environment after incarceration. I've also then transitioned over more into the clinical mental health space. And I've also worked with incarcerated individuals who were in jail. I've worked with minimum, maximum security prisoners. I've done substance abuse. I've also worked in a diabetes institute, working with patients to make behavior changes in order to improve their health. And I'm currently working in renal care right now. So I've just kind of done a lot, but the basis of what I've been doing has focused on mental health, but I've just worked in many different areas with many different people.
All right. It's definitely a lot of extensive experience. But I want to kind of give just a little bit of information for a lot of people that are tuning in. Just a little bit of statistics that I got from the National Alliance of Mental Illness. You got 1 in 5 U.S. adults that experience mental illness each year. You got 1 in 20 U.S. adults that experience serious mental illnesses each year. And you also have 50% of all lifetime mental illnesses begin at age 14 and 75% by age 24, which, you know, a lot of times people don't understand. Those things aren't diagnosed at those ages of 14 and 24 a lot of times because people are avoiding and, you know, kind of looking at, you know, something I can get over. It's something I can, you know, it's just a phase or something of that nature instead of actually looking at the issue and addressing the issue. And, you know, as much as we want to talk about regular human beings or, you know, human beings that are actually, you know, not in the profession of sports, athletes probably get this a little bit more than what anyone would want to talk about. Like you have a Dak Prescott, you have a AJ Brown, you have a Hayden Hurst that have talked about those different things and how their mental has been affecting them and how they had to, you know, get into a mental health space or talk to someone about their mental health. So I want to ask, what are some of the things you can kind of, you know, or some of the things you kind of notice from people that they may have some challenges in terms of mental health that you may have noticed along the years?
Yeah, so I think what I have noticed with people with mental health issues, one of the bigger things is that there's not a lot of communication about, you know, how people are feeling and what they are experiencing. A lot of times, these mental health issues get masked because there's such a, you know, there's so much stigma that is attached to mental health in general, especially I would even say too in the sports world as well. You know, athletes are kind of these individuals who have these incredible talents and physical abilities to be able to perform. So they are seen as strong and, you know, resilient and able to do all these things. And so mental health, the stigma that's attached to that is that if you have a mental health issue and you can't get over it, then you are perceived as weak. And so there's a lot of shame that's attached to that as well. And so you do see people not really communicating those mental health issues. And that can lead to a path of not getting the treatment that you need in order to be well and manage it in a healthy way.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you know, once say someone is able to recognize those mental health issues that are going on, they're in therapy, or just they're able to recognize them in general. What are some things that you kind of can point out that people can do to kind of relieve that pressure, or, you know, try to, you know, find a way to cope with the different things that they're dealing with, or you know, while talking to a therapist, I should say, not just doing this on their own, but, you know, while talking to a mental health expert?
Well, sure. So definitely when you're talking to a mental health professional, you have the ability to process everything that is happening in your life both present and things that have happened in the past that may be coming into the present. The mental health therapist will help you get the tools that you need to be able to work through these issues. So if you are in therapy, I would definitely say use the tools that your therapist and you guys have talked about in therapy. A lot of times, when you go to a therapy session, you may see your therapist once a week or once every other week. A lot of it is you doing the things that you need to do on a daily basis that your therapist has, worked with you on. You have to then work on that and implement that on a daily basis. The other thing that I would say is self-care is definitely important. And self-care is essentially doing something that you enjoy, that doesn't cause you additional stress, that provides some relaxation and relief to you. And so I always encourage people to develop a self-care routine. And you can do this self-care routine. You can do multiple things within a day. Because self-care doesn't have to, be a lavish trip or, take a lot of time for you. It could be that you are, do a deep breathing exercise for 5 minutes, or you take an extended shower, or, you do something to pour into yourself to help you reset. And then I'd also say, having a really good community of support, a really good support system is key. Like I said before, there are lots of stigmas attached to mental health. And so if you could find someone who is very supportive of you, but who will also hold you accountable, especially when they are noticing that you're kind of reverting back to some of those old behaviors, is definitely key to helping you manage your mental health and do things outside of the therapy session to really help you.
All right. Definitely a lot of great tidbits and a lot of great information passed along right there. But we're going to take a quick break. We're going to get into mental health in our community, and then also mental health when handling that when you're feeling okay as well. We're going to get into that, but we're going to take a quick commercial break. You're listening into Touring the AFC South. We're doing a mental health awareness episode on Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton.
Whether it's local or long distance, Milligan Logistics has you covered. Milligan Logistics was established in 2020 with over a combined 15 years of experience in trucking, hauling, and logistics, along with over 50 years collectively of project management experience. Again, whether it's near or far, Milligan Logistics has you covered with quality service, efficiency while taking pleasure in exceeding clients' expectations. Need goods moved short or long distance? Milligan Logistics has you covered. Just reach out to them at 615-354-2618. That's 615-354-2618. Or you can send them an email at milliganlogistics@gmail.com. Again, that's milliganlogistics@gmail.com.
All right, and we are back from commercial break. And as we were talking, going into commercial break, talked about different things, you do with mental health in terms of, listening to what your mental health expert or your therapist tells you, of course, obviously, but, surrounding yourself with the community and things like that. Now, you spoke of community, but I want to talk about our community. We're both Black people. So, mental health is definitely something that is in our community is not necessarily talked about a lot. If you go back a generation or two, mental health wasn't even, something that was discussed. It basically was just something you skirted under the carpet. It's kind of like the boogeyman, basically. Mm-hmm. So in this generation, how are you seeing kind of more Black people kind of handling mental health better?
So So I love that you brought this topic up. What I am seeing is that there's a lot more conversation about mental health um, in our community. I do, hear more about, vulnerability and, people just opening up more about how they are feeling, and opening up more about, even getting mental health treatment. So I think that is good. And I think we are headed in a really good direction. Like I said, the community that I grew up in was, very small. It was a predominantly Black community. And you're right, like mental health was something that, people didn't really talk about. They would just kind of, brush people off and just say, oh, this person is crazy or, whatever. And then, nothing is really done about it. And, people would suffer in silence and not have their mental health needs met. And then what you see too is not only does the mental health affect the individual, but it also spreads to the family, and creates issues within the family, and then also ultimately into the community. And you see things like violence and other things like that happening because of unmanaged mental health issues. And, it's no secret that in the Black community, there is, you're perceived as, not right or crazy or weak or, all these other things that, shame is attached to when it comes to mental health. But I do think we're headed in a good direction. I do feel like there is more that we need to do to place value on our mental health. Because even though the conversations are being had, I don't think we're there yet with the valuing our mental health as much.
Right, right. And then also I would say, I'll take it a step further, is taking the actual steps to get the mental health, even if we do or don't feel like we need it. And oftentimes, a lot of times we feel like we don't need it is because we're trying to kind of, I guess, suppress the feeling that we do need it at that time, basically.
Absolutely. That plays a role in it. But I also think that the value of mental health also comes with, us being able to access mental health, right? Because, our insurance, if you have insurance, some people are uninsured, and we know that definitely in the Black community, there is a disproportionate amount of African Americans who don't have health insurance. And if you don't have these things, then you're likely not going to have access to mental health treatment, right? And if you are, low income or elderly, and you have Medicare or Medicaid, sometimes those programs will allow you to have access to mental health treatment, but you may not get quality care, or you may not get your treatment in a timely manner as well. So those are some other things that play into our inability to get the treatment that we need.
Yeah, definitely. You said it. But I want to kind of jump over into another aspect of mental health, and that's mental health when people think you don't need it, in terms of physical or mental therapy and things like that. A lot of times people will get to a space where they go to therapy and then they feel like, okay, cool, therapy's worked. I don't need to go to therapy anymore. But honestly, that's probably the time where you probably most need it, is to kind of have those checkups to make sure you're still on track and where you need to be. So what are your kind of thoughts about people kind of getting therapy at points, even when they feel like they don't, or they may not need it, but, in all actuality, kind of getting those kind of tune-ups, kind of keeping you on that path that you're on?
So I definitely believe that, having tune-ups are good. But what I will say is therapy is not meant to be a lifetime thing. So you may go into therapy, and when you work with your therapist, there are goals that you work towards meeting or accomplishing in therapy. And so your therapist might say, like, you know what, I think you're at a point right now where we can transition out of therapy, and you're using your coping skills consistently. You're doing all the things that you need to do to kind of thrive and manage your mental health in a healthy way. And so this is something that you can transition away from. And so, yes, you can have tune-ups. That's great. And, definitely, I think, in therapy, you will learn yourself and also understand your triggers and destructive behaviors and things of that nature. And so if you start to have moments where you are backsliding or, having some issues, it's always great to go back into therapy. So if you're at that point and you're feeling like, you know what, I've done therapy before, I don't need it, I don't need any help, I would definitely say it would be a good choice to go back into therapy and get that tune up, and so that you can get that support, so that you can continue to manage your mental health in a good way.
Okay, all right. Now, the unique part of being an athlete is that things can change or situations can change at the drop of a hat. Now, in life, things can change that way too. But just to give you an example in terms of athletes, you can be employed 1 minute, especially when the NFL, you can be employed 1 minute and then they decide, oh, well, you're not really worth this amount of money, and they can cut you at the drop of a dime. Now, everyone thinks about the physical part of it, the finances and things like that, or, not having somebody want you on their team, but the mental part of it can play with you as well. Can you kind of talk about, how the change of a circumstance or anything like that on a drop of a dime can kind of play with mental health and affect someone's mental health?
It can definitely impact someone's mental health tremendously. So much to the point where someone, having a significant change like that, and how it impacts your life, it can be traumatic. You can have a traumatic experience from, that blunt and huge change in your life. And I also think about when you think about sports and being a part of a team and a community, and having certain support systems and things of that nature, and then that being ripped away from you. A lot of times people, there are issues with your identity. Like your identity is attached to, being a part of this team, being a part of, a certain, profession. All of those things can, definitely set you back emotionally. But one of the other things that I don't think a lot of people talk about with huge changes is, you can go through a grief and loss process when that happens. A lot of people attach grief and loss to death, but you can go through a grief and loss process with a significant change that has happened in your life. And so you can go through the grieving. There can also be depression and also anxiety attached to that as well, because you don't know, there's that uncertainty of what's going to happen in the future and if this will happen to me again. So it can definitely, there are many ways that a drastic change like that can affect your mental health. And it's important. It's important that, people, especially in the sports world, provide support for that. That is definitely important.
Now, you speaking of support, and that's going where I wanted to go next. Honestly, looking at the NFL and NBA and all those different places, I feel like they do a lot to support the physical health of people, but they don't do enough to support the mental health of people. So, in your opinion, what would you like to see in terms of the NFL, in terms of the mental health aspect of the NFL and taking care of a player mentally as well as physically?
So one thing that I would say about that is I think changing the culture of winning at all costs. I know it's $1 billion industry and all of that, but I feel that you can be just as effective by having a caring environment. And so what that means is, not fostering the negative, um, the negative thoughts that are attached to mental health. Checking in with players and checking in for how they feel, but also changing the environment of simply how you talk to players as well. Like, coaches, have watched games and seen how coaches interact with players. And so that's something that's simple that could change. But I also think there should be more education to coaches, to the upper management on mental health as well. And then that can also help them implement effective programs that can help support the players, but also creating an environment where players' feelings are validated, and that there is not as much, there's not shame that's attached to struggling emotionally. And I feel like a lot of times, in the sports world, especially that I've seen, is that people don't start talking about mental health until something horrible happens, and then the topic of mental health comes up. So it's more reactive instead of proactive.
Gotcha. Definitely can understand that. And now, I want to say before, we get too far, that's all the questions I did have. And I want to kind of, deep dive into everything. And you definitely have accurately and given great information to us on this episode. And I want to kind of, thank you for coming on, first and foremost.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, I also want to give you the floor to kind of talk about different things that you have going on in terms of where people can find you on social media, and also any other messages you have about mental health and addressing mental health and actually taking mental health very, very seriously, whether it be in the sports world or in our communities.
Yes, thank you so much. So you can definitely find me. I am the founder of a platform called Mind Your Mental, and that's MINE, Your Mental. You can find me on YouTube. I definitely post videos about, providing education about mental health, and also tips for how to manage your mental health, and just how to support someone in your life who may be struggling with mental health. I think that, approaching family, friends, anyone who's struggling with empathy is definitely important. So that's where you can find me on YouTube. You can also follow me on Instagram, again, at Mind Your Mental as well. And I also provide content there that's all about mental health, providing education on mental health. So I think the big message that I would like to just, send to everybody, and the big takeaway is to, take steps to really value and manage your mental health. Is definitely important. Your mental health is just as important as your physical health. And research has shown that your mental health impacts your physical health. And so if you are in chronic stress situations, if your mental health is not managed and is, chronically unmanaged, it can really affect your blood pressure, your heart rate, chronic illnesses like diabetes. So it's just as important as your physical health. So please take care of that. If you, don't have a support system, there are platforms like mine who just create a safe space for you to get to learn about mental health and also challenge yourself. But also, seeking out a therapist if you have the means to do that. is definitely a place where you can, have someone to talk to about what you're going through, but also to gain the tools that you need to really manage your mental health. So just be supportive to your one another, but also do what you need to do to take care of yourself as well is definitely important.
All right. Well, I definitely thank you for your time. Thank you for your information, your insight. Also, you did mention about approaching others with empathy that if they're going through some struggles as well, which is very, very key when you're approaching someone. You can't go at them with going with stones. You got to go on them with love and feathers.
Absolutely.
So that's what's something that a lot of people can actually take in mind as well when people are going through things. But I want to thank you again for coming on. This is Cathyanna Nelson. I want to thank you again, mental health expert, advocate. Thank everyone for tuning in. My name, of course, is Mike Patton. You can find me on Twitter at MikePatton82. That's MikePaton 82 on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram at that's THA, not THE, _general_MP as well. And of course, you can find Touring the AFC South on YouTube, as well as all listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Am I missing any? Google Podcasts. There you go. But you can find this podcast anywhere. And again, this is a special episode, Mental Health Awareness Month. I want to definitely talk about mental health awareness because you can be healthy physically on the outside, and it could look that way. But mentally, you could be going through a lot of different things. And we have to start addressing that every day, every week, every month, not just this month, but every month. We have to address these different things. All right. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank everyone for actually listening. Hopefully you got and gathered some information from this episode of Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton. We're out.